Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4-3-5-9-2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7-3-9-8-9 out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds HEPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Welcome to the Denise Simon Experience, ladies and gentlemen. Very happy to have you along for the ride. And Rachel Bovard decided she was going to join our ride too. Rachel is a frequent guest on the Denise Simon Experience. She's been all over the Hill, at least since 2006. And she's the senior director of policy over at the Conservative Partnership Institute. And we were just I was laughing at her, and I think she was laughing at me because Washington, D. is a stupid town. I mean, it's just stupid. We're sitting out here looking back on the news clips that we get and the snippets that we have from the people in the halls of Congress. And, they just want to come out with all kinds of expletives about how stupid all this is, but they have to just kind of toe the line for being on TV. Right, Rachel?
No, that's exactly right. You couldn't tell that the government is shut down because Congress just doesn't care. They've all moved on to debating other things, and President Trump is sort of left in the Oval Office asking them to fund his wall, and he is not getting a lot from Congress. He's not in Congress.
He's not going to get the money, is he?
I think it really remains to be seen. I think this is a giant game of chicken right now, and it's a matter of who's going to blink first. You constantly hear this media narrative that Trump is the one that needs to compromise. Trump's being intransigent.
But he has.
But you don't see the same narrative being applied to congressional Democrats who are being just as intransigent as Trump. They are saying, no, zero money for the wall. That is not a compromise position either. So I think both sides are sort of waiting each other out. You see the president is looking at other means of funding the wall. He's looking at declaring a national emergency. He's looking at reprogramming funds from the Pentagon budget. So this is going to go on for a little while still.
There's something that now that apparently there's a handful of spending bills that do not include the wall, and it would reopen government, but the White House is threatened to veto. Those spending bills, coming out of the House, they all have to go through the Senate too, correct?
They do have to go through the Senate,
Okay.
and Mitch McConnell has said he will not put anything on the floor that the president has said he will not sign. So he's not taking up those bills from the House. But I think interestingly, you have two bills from the House. You have one that just funds the Department of Homeland Security, which is border security through February, no wall money. And then you have a second bill that funds the rest of the government through next year. However, Democrats put pro-abortion language in that bill as well. So so it's not just over the wall that Senate Republicans don't want to deal with this. It's over the Democrats taking this opportunity to push abortion policy and a lot of other controversial issues that the Senate does not want to deal with.
It occurred to me, and tell me, I might be just as stupid as everybody else up there in Washington, D.C., but it occurred to me that I think Trump missed an opportunity with his 8-minute Oval Office talk. And that was, I would say if I were Trump, I would have perhaps said, hey, we're going to not have a conversation until we have the leadership, including, Schumer and Pelosi and all the rest of them, the Sheila Jackson Lees or the Cory Bookers or the Dianne Feinsteins. We want them to go to, and we will designate the areas along the southwestern border that they need to go down to and spend 3 days, because I guarantee you none of those people have been down there. And once they spend those 3 days, then they can come back and talk, because they're all speaking like they're experts on border security, and none of them are they?
No, I think that's a good point. And, I think in the speech, President Trump laid out a series of facts that are pretty devastating to Democrats or anyone who opposes the border wall policy. I mean, he really painted the picture of what is going on down there, which is a humanitarian crisis that, to be quite frank, you have people putting their lives at risk to cross our border because they know they can stay. Our policies incentivize them to do that. You have, the 17,000 people arrested with criminal histories coming across the border. 90% of the heroin in this country that's responsible for a lot of the overdoses comes from the southern border. I mean, this is not simply an issue of legal or illegal immigration. This is a sovereignty issue as well as a humanitarian issue. Right. So I think the president laid that out very well last night.
I was... the other interesting thing is what kind of dovetails that perhaps he could have included was the fact that our new governor out there in California and our New York City mayor have both declared that health care is a right, and that they were going to provide paid health care to anybody, in their, under their authority in the state of California or in the city of New York, which I would argue would really be the entire Northeast corridor, because people can cancel their insurance policies and just drive to New York. So now you've got two massive states, Rachel, that have created probably one of the largest incentives for illegal immigration ever. I mean, under those two, politicians, Osama bin Laden could get, a free liver transplant.
Yeah, this is a huge issue. The entitlements that are expanding, and when you do that, the effects that people don't talk about is the fact that the poor people who Medicaid was made for get pushed off the rolls, because obviously health insurance companies want to prioritize people with the higher reimbursements, which are healthier people. So you end up hurting the population that's supposed to be helped by these entitlement programs. And that's only exacerbated by the illegal immigration problem, people coming here illegally and jumping on these entitlements. And so you're seeing a tremendous amount of pressure, on these programs that we are already strained, that we don't have the resources to support. So that's another issue, and why we need to get the border under control. Well,
I keep saying we need, the House won't hold the hearing, but the Senate can, with the, Republicans in power. And that is, hey, let's hold a hearing and let's see what these costs really are. Is it $150 billion a year to the federal government? Is it $90 billion to all of the states? I mean, let's understand the full-blown consequences. And, it's a fascinating thing here. I was looking for something else because of California and New York, and I came across, by accident, the first thing that popped up was a hearing that was held in 2003. Where Miss Sheila Jackson Lee at the time was the ranking person on the Department of Homeland Security's committee. And she was talking about the fact that there was a case in New York where, a woman was absolutely beaten to death by 4 illegals, and she was upset. Everybody was upset. And then she does her opening statement and comes out and says, hey, this is something that really is worrisome. I am committed to making the changes that these kinds of cases don't ever happen again. That was 2003, Miss Sheila. So
yeah, and you're seeing that from a lot of the hypocrisy on this issue from Democrats is really stunning, because you also see this, Trump refers to it frequently, the Secure Fence Act of 2006 that Chuck Schumer voted for, Hillary Clinton, then Senator Barack Obama, all voted for 700 miles of fencing at the southern border. I mean, these are people who have supported the exact policies that President Trump is pushing and which they now oppose, and they don't seem to be bothered by that, to be quite honest. They have no problem with the fact that
there's no shame. You can place the shame in their lap. They could be wearing the big, huge scarlet letter S for shame, and they don't know that it's there. They refuse to acknowledge it. It is. I mean, it's really just kind of remarkable that. I just came across this Chloe by accident, and I'm looking at it kind of sideways. I just even looked at her opening statement, and. We have a commitment, and we thank you for your service to the police, and blah, 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 blah. This woman was killed in New Jersey by 4. I mean, do they kind of just forget all of this? Or, I think that Trump also missed an opportunity, because he could have said last night on a bookend, on the front part of his little 8-minute speech and on the closing, is that Schumer and Pelosi and the rest of these Democrats took the same oath he did. To protect sovereignty rights of this country. I mean, we have lines of demarcation, right?
No, that's exactly right. And I think he's trying to make that point to Democrats to say, look, this is a dangerous issue. This is not manufactured. This is not, an issue that occurs in one place and not the other. Our southern border is being overrun, and it's not just with illegal immigration. I mean, there's a huge safety issue. A lot of these Democrats talk about the drug epidemic and the opioid epidemic. Well, a key driver of that is, drugs coming across the border. I mean, you can count on one hand a ton of issues that need to be dealt with, and that starts with building a border wall, or at their very least, restoring order at the southern border.
And yet, the one agency that really hasn't been brought into any part of this debate is the DEA.
They work part and parcel with the Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
And I think, there is some discussion of, what their role should be. However, they are part of the government that is funded, because they are part of DOJ, the Department of Justice. So they are currently funded. So I think, but the drug crisis is part of this border security crisis, and I'm glad the president is finally starting to talk about it. We're now allowing ourselves to have a national conversation about what's really going on at the border, because under Democrats, we were never allowed to do that.
And you're walking around the Hill. Everybody last night expected him to declare a national emergency, a threat to national security, and he didn't. Is there a reason why?
Well, I suspect, they're trying to actually get Congress to do their job before they, look at other alternatives. It is certainly legal within the president's legal right to declare a national emergency, or to have access to certain funding in the Pentagon budget for the national interest. All of that is legal and available. However, I would argue that, Trump really wants Congress to act on this issue. This is a congressional prerogative, and Congress is shirking its responsibility in failing to address this issue. And so I think that's why Trump's speech was pitch perfect last night. He put it right back on Congress with that really stunning line about how much more blood will be shed before Congress, does its job. That's the key issue here. Because look, Trump can take a national emergency directive, he can reprogram funds, but he's immediately going to get sued. That is going to have to work its way through the courts. Again, we're punting another policy decision to the courts, which as conservatives we don't support usually. So I'd love to see him continue to push Congress and continue to force congressional Democrats to deal with him, because Congress is the issue. Senate Republicans are in the same boat. They need to deal with this issue. Congress would love for Trump to find another way to fund the wall so they don't have to deal with it. Trump should not let them off.
I agree with that part. I agree with it. The one question here, and since you're there, I need you to run up and down the hallways and go knock on a few Democrats' doors and ask the question, What is the acceptable rate of death of American citizens at the hands of illegals, and what is the acceptable rate of death by heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl overdose?
Yeah, this is exactly the type of thing that we should be asking congressional Democrats. And I hope, Senate Republicans take heed of the president's message and do the same and start putting that question to their colleagues, because right now, Mitch McConnell has moved the Senate on from this debate. They are currently debating a Middle East security bill. They are not even talking about the border wall. They aren't even talking about the shutdown. Mitch McConnell has also publicly said, hey, I'm taking a back seat here. This has to be worked out between Trump and Schumer. And I personally think that's the wrong approach. I think he should be leading Republicans on this issue and really forcing Democrats into a corner, force them to own their obstruction, because right now he's letting them get away with it consequence-free.
So I guess the bottom line is this. This is kind of setting the table for 2020, where the Republicans can turn around and say to all of these hundreds of potential Democrat presidential candidates and those that are running for re-election in the legislative process, hey, you guys allowed this. You didn't negotiate. You didn't bring anything to the table except spending bills, but you're not addressing the immigration. So is that really what the headline is going to be as we get into 2019 leading into 2020?
Yeah, I think it depends how long the shutdown drags out. I mean, the voters' memory is pretty short when it comes to these
indeed.
things. The Republicans faced a shutdown in 2013 and then still managed to flip the majority in the Senate 3 years later. So, these things tend to, not have an effect at the ballot box. They poll badly, right? The polls are bad, but they don't actually impact the ballot box. But I do think that this is now part of the national conversation. Immigration enforcement and border security are definitely going to be on the agenda moving forward for the 2020 presidential. And, it's a hugely important issue to a lot of people. If you look at the exit polling for the 2018 midterms, the top two issues on people's minds were healthcare and immigration. I don't think that's likely to change.
No, those are going to be with us until I become a grandmother, and that isn't even, well, that's a topic for another day. I just got this alert here that Pelosi rejects the wall, period, and that Trump walked out of the meeting.
Well, look, again, Democrats are unwilling to compromise. They are flattered and unwilling to listen to the president. The last meeting that they had, he tried to have Kirstjen Nielsen, his Secretary of Homeland Security, give a presentation about facts on the border. Pelosi rejected it, started talking over the cabinet secretary, refused to engage. So this is the attitude that President Trump is dealing with. And I wish the media would cover it a little bit more fairly. You can say Trump is being intransigent and stubborn, but you cannot do it fairly unless you agree that Democrats are doing it.
And they're much worse. I mean, I would say they're actually going in reverse. If, she's not going to give anything for a wall, a fence, a barrier, or any of that. So if we have McConnell doing some kind of a foreign policy securities, piece of legislation, that's all well and good. But I would argue that Pelosi has just said, we're not going to pass anything, right? Until this government reopens.
Right. They are refusing to budge on this issue. They are refusing to give the president money for his wall. And look, I mean, this is something Trump's been asking for the last 2 years. I don't think he's prepared to give up on it. And so until those two sides can sort of find a solution that works, and that's going to involve Democrats having to fund part of Trump's wall, and they're going to have to actually fund the new construction, because Democrat proposals in the past that claim they are funding part of Trump's wall has included provisions that actually restrict the funding for being used for any new construction. So they'll say, oh, you can use it for drones at the border, you can use it for pedestrian fencing, but you can't actually build a wall. That is not wall funding. So until Democrats are prepared to negotiate, I don't see this ending anytime soon.
I think he's been challenged completely here on the art of the deal, hasn't he? I mean, I've seen him give some way here in the past week. And we have a handful of we have a handful of Republicans that are kind of siding with the Democrats on some of this, don't we?
Yes, and I think that's a direct result of the inaction that you've seen at the congressional level, because Senator McConnell telegraphing very publicly that he does not care about this wall is giving his members of, equal authority to do so. So you're starting to see senators like Susan Collins, Republican senators like Susan Collins from Maine, Cory Gardner from Colorado, Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia are all starting to say, look, maybe this needs to end. Maybe we should just vote on what the Democrats sent us. That's not good. If this ends, I do think it will be because congressional Republicans have completely undermined their own president by passing Democrat legislation.
It's not looking good here, is it? I mean, this is a chess game, and it's kind of like only one person's waiting for the next move that's not going to come.
These things have a way of working themselves out. It's unlike chess in the sense that you have a lot of, sort of fatigue, I think, that weighs in a little bit, and there's a lot of emotion and a lot of public opinion that matters. And so all of those things weigh into how this is going to end. But I do think if we had a Congress that was willing to fight on this, if we had Republicans in Congress that were willing to force Democrats in the Senate every single day to take votes on these issues, you'd start to see some headway. But again, we don't have a Senate Republicans that are willing to do that. And I think it's hindering President Trump's ability to negotiate.
Yeah, he just tweeted, total waste of time. Just left a meeting with Chuck and Nancy, total waste of time. I asked what was going to happen in 30 days if I quickly open things up. Are you going to approve a border security, which includes the wall? Nancy said no. So he even offered to open up government if she would approve the wall, and she said no.
Yeah, again, but it's definitely Trump that's not compromising here.
Whoa. Well, now we have some other agencies, TSA, perhaps even some in Border Patrol, maybe some in Coast Guard that are going to start speaking out, causing some other panics here. Is that right?
Yes. I think no one has yet missed a paycheck. I think the first missed paycheck will be this Friday. I think it's very unfortunate. However, I do think there'll be back pay, right? Congress has always paid off these workers at the end of a shutdown, but that doesn't mean it's easy in the interim, right? There's a lot of people that live paycheck to paycheck. And I think it's unfortunate, look, especially now that since President Trump has said, look, I will open the government if we can come to a deal on border security, and congressional Democrats have rejected that. This is now sitting directly in the lap of congressional Democrats. And, it's going to be a tough thing for them to have to live with.
Woo! I look forward to your articles. I look forward to your text messages and see where this is going to go. Tomorrow's going to look just like today, I have a feeling, but maybe next week there'll be some kind of a breakthrough. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Rachel Bovard for giving us a pulse reading here what's happening in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Rachel.
My pleasure, as always.
All right, we're coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons, too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Narcotics. I hate them. I hate them. And they never have a good ending. Derek Maltz, a former guest on the Denise Simon Experience, who is also a former agent in charge of special operations at the DEA, spent 28 years there, has been kind enough to join us on the Denise Simon Experience. With that, Happy New Year and welcome, Mr. Derek.
Happy New Year to you as well, Denise. Thanks for having me back.
All right, I'm mad at you because in 28 years you didn't solve this problem. How come?
Well, it's a little overwhelming, actually.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, if anybody just watches live PD on a Friday or Saturday night, the epidemic, it's ridiculous. And I'm not even sure we necessarily know where to go because I don't think the stories and the cases coming out of the DEA get any press that they should. Do you?
That's exactly true, Denise. There's a lot of reasons for that. But to answer your first point, you have to start educating the kids at a very young age. That's number one. Unfortunately, the kids today, they just don't understand the types of poison that are being manufactured all over the world and sent around the internet right into their homes. And parents have to wake up as well because parents are like oblivious to this. This isn't like 1970 smoking a marijuana joint. This is a whole different world that we're in. And now when kids can just click a mouse right in their back, you know, in their bedrooms and get drugs sent to their house directly or a P.O. box or something like that, it's just so much easier to, you know, get your hands on narcotics and really, really dangerous narcotics as well. So it's got to start with the education. I mean, unfortunately, we've lost sight on the education piece. I mean, after 9/11, the entire government focused 100%. It seemed like their efforts were on preventing another terrorist act, which is obviously very important. But we took our eye off the ball in other areas. So there's components of the government, like the Office of National Drug Control Policy, that in my opinion should have been way more engaged in education and prevention. You know, we used to have commercials about the dangers of drugs. We used to have campaigns like Just Say No. And all of that kind of went away at a time when technology was blowing up as these big pharma companies were pushing this unbelievable pain medicine out there in the world. And so little Johnny gets a little football injury. He goes out to the doctor. The doctor gives him 100 Oxycontin, for an example. The kid gets hooked. Now the kid's looking for, a way to maintain his high where he can afford it. And after ripping off his mother's jewelry and selling his jewelry at a pawn shop, the kid then goes out and buys a $10 bag of heroin. And now, unfortunately, that same heroin is going to have fentanyl in it in most cases now, it seems like. And then kids are dropping dead everywhere. So, yeah, it's a very, very complex problem. But, Denise, the problem is it doesn't seem like we have a really good focus on the issues that need to be dealt with right now.
When you were on before, Derek, you and I spoke about the education component, the just say no. My younger son was at the shank of his, I think, later elementary school years, and it really resonated with him. I've talked to a couple of gang experts who have also said the very same thing. There was a window of time where that whole just say no thing wasn't just about the drugs, but it was also the spin-offs of what happens with the whole narcotics industry. So there was a good outcome for a large part of the adolescent kids at that age group. And then you're right, it just fell off. And surely government at state level and at federal level have seen this. I've watched congressional hearings, and yet drug policy and drug law has not kept pace with where we are today, right?
Oh, 100%. So going back to your point about education, I mean, when I was a kid, I can recall vividly being in the car with my mother and father, both of them smoking, the windows were up, and I was in the back seat, had no idea. It was disgusting, but that's the way it was back in those days. And then over time, there was so much education in the schools at a young age about the dangers of cigarette smoking, for an example, right? Mm-hmm. And then as you go on in life and you start getting all these warnings and TV commercials, now my kids, for an example, as they were growing up, they saw their grandmother die from cancer, and they saw the coughing and the diseases out there. And then eventually, now when they became high school kids, they wouldn't go anywhere near cigarette smoking, because they were educated. Their brains are like sponges when they're kids, right? Mm-hmm. And so the dangers of this stuff and showing the black lungs, filling up, and people dying and suffering and families, being destroyed. This is kind of resonating in like kids' heads, right? But with the drugs, right, if you look at pharmaceutical pills, right, kids were figuring, hey, mom and dad are taking these pills. The doctor gave it to them, so it's got to be safe, right? So it all started with stealing.
Yeah, it all came from a doctor. Yay!
Yeah, it all came from a doctor. It came from the medicine cabinet. It was left over, and kids started using this. They started feeling good, but they didn't know any better. Nobody was telling them. Nobody was teaching them. So we kind of lost that, and we have to get back to that. I think we could still do a good job if we get all the resources focused in on this. Like if it was my call, I would have mandatory throughout the entire United States. Every single elementary school would have some type of drug education. It'd be a mandatory class, and it would also be in the middle school. Now, honestly, by the time they get to high school, it may be too late. It has to start when they're younger, because then they're trained mentally, about the dangers of this stuff. So, I mean, obviously that's something that's, going to be done, I think. I mean, if you look at some of the strategy papers and some of the stuff that they're trying to implement, but everything is so damn slow. Meanwhile, look at just the opioids alone in 2017, we had like 134 people dying a day from opioid-related overdoses, right? Think about that. What's really scary, Denise, we kind of went over some of this before, but if you look at like all the wars, right? 9/11.
I was just going to go there. Thank you for that. Go ahead.
9/11 hits, and obviously it was an unbelievable day for all of us. And then you look at all the wars, right? You look at 9/11, there was about 3,000 dead. Iraq, like 4,400. Afghanistan, like 2,300 and change. So combine all of those efforts, all of those days, right, of people dying. It was only 9,700. I say only in the context of in drugs alone from 2017 killed over 72,000. Like, think about that. And it doesn't seem like there's that same sense of urgency. And, I have a major issue with what's going on down, like, let's say in Mexico, because the Mexican cartels are like global terrorists. If you think about it, right? If you think about what is going on, because most of the drug overdoses are from drugs coming from Mexico and the cartels. And then like it doesn't seem like there's enough pressure being put on those cartels. If it was up to me, the drones that hit the Al-Qaeda guy from the coal bombing the other day?
Yeah.
The cartels would be feeling some of those drones as well. Because they're destroying our country and they're destroying families. All you got to do is talk to one mother or father that lost their kid from a opioid overdose death, and you can understand it. You can feel their pain. And so there's a lot there's a lot more that needs to be done. But in my view, we have to step up the pace because we're losing valuable time. And the laws are so antiquated, not just the laws, in regards to some of these different types of drugs that are being manufactured in China, for an example, but just the technology laws. Do you know how archaic this country's technology laws are? And all these bad guys, they're using encrypted communications to do their business. Why do you think law enforcement is falling further and further behind? Because law enforcement has laws from the 60s, to go after these bad guys when it comes to technology. And our Congress has cobwebs in their ears and their eyes. They have no idea, and nothing against the older people. I'm pretty old myself now, but I stay current.
Careful
on
about
what's
that.
going on. Yeah, I'm old. I'll be the first
I'm
to
old.
say I'm old. But some of these people in Congress, I mean, they're still using rotary phones, I think, in their house.
Here's a sidebar. Here's a sidebar when you're talking about these laws and what's antiquated. I would think, well, let me ask you, how many DEA fellas or gals are sitting in the El Chapo Guzman trial right now? Because I'm getting snippets of testimony, and I got to tell you, whatever's coming out in testimony by witnesses against El Chapo ought to be clarion calls for what went on and is going on. Right, Derek?
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, I speak about this every single day of the week, just so you know, Denise. A lot of my buddies, I'm from New York. This case is in New York. I know one of the main agents who sits in every day, and I talk to bosses in the DEA about the case. I talk to people in other agencies like Homeland Security who had a very, very important part in the case. And it's amazing if you look at some of the stuff that's coming out in the news, from the corruption at the highest levels in the Mexican government, to the volumes of drugs and money that they were moving, to the violence that they were involved in. It's like your worst nightmare listening to this, because you said it perfectly. It's what's still going on, because when Chapo Guzman got taken down and then escaped and got taken down again, it just provided opportunities for like the Jalisco cartel leadership, El Mencho, and these other guys. And so the Guzman kids now, Chapo's kids are running around involved with the cartel and making money. Miles Zambada, he's still out there. There's plenty of leadership people still in control. And so you're right. I mean, all you got to do is listen to read the transcripts of the trial, or read the news every day. We have reporters that are in the courtroom every day reporting on the details in that trial. And it's really an eye-opening.
It's terrifying.
Terrifying is a better word. But it's just not going to stop. I mean, so people have to have more of a sense of urgency, in my view.
And so where we are, going back to the education piece, Derek, is in secondary education, let's say post-high school, when you get into university, it is requirement that every student take an ethics class, period. Okay, great. So why aren't we making it mandatory to have a narcotics class? You see where I'm going with this? And if nothing else, just go after the testimony coming out of the Guzman trial.
Right. Now, one of the things I will point out is this, which is really one of the most troubling things for me. A lot of these kids that are actually dying, if you look at their history, some of them had no idea what they were taking. In other words, they were at college and one of their buddies said, hey, take this Ritalin pill, take this Adderall, because you're going to stay up late at night. You're going to stay focused on your project or your paper that's due tomorrow morning. And this poor college kid doesn't know any better, because no one's ever told them that the Mexican cartels have industrial-sized pill presses where they're making these fentanyl-laced pills that they're advertising as something else, and then these kids are dying from fentanyl poison. And so this is a big thing. Like, this is what's new right now. It's like they don't know what they're getting. They're not getting a quality control Adderall or Ritalin pill from the pharmacist. They're getting a poisonous pill from some lab in Mexico, and they're dying instantly. And that's a really serious problem.
And the left, interestingly enough, they want to blame Big Pharma for overdoses and dependencies, but they never say a thing about the cartels. And when you talk about the industrial volume of production, that industrial volume of production that's going on in Mexico and Central and South America isn't any different than the industrial production of Captagon in the Middle East, right?
Right. No, I mean, okay, so let's talk about some industrial production. So you're 100% right. Yes, the big pharma had a very big role in pushing out mass amounts of opioids back in the 90s and the 2000s, right? So they were taking advantage of people that didn't know any better, and they were making lots of money. There's no doubt about that. There's no one that can dispute the amounts of pills that Big Pharma was sending out there to the public, and it got a lot of people addicted. But the real issue today is the complete domination by the Mexican cartels, and I like to refer to them as the nasty, greedy, violent Mexican cartels. They are taking complete advantage of these addicted Americans that need their high, and they're buying fentanyl from China directly at like $3,000 or $5,000 a kilogram, and they're mixing it with different types of substances, including cocaine, by the way. And that's really scaring me, because you're going to get a whole new type of user from Wall Street and some financial sectors that have been using cocaine socially. Now they're going to start be snorting cocaine. They're going to be dying because fentanyl is mixed into cocaine coming from Mexico. So you're right. The political angle right now is, Mexico's fine. The border is all these nice people that want to come in to have a better life. And we're missing the point that there's plenty of people that want a better life to come into America. I don't blame them, because, the majority of the people that are trying to get into the country just want a better life. I agree with that. But there's a lot of people taking advantage of the porous border to get their drugs, to get their people in position to make them a lot of money. I mean, just listen to the Chapo trial and you hear the billions of dollars that they've all made. So basically you have a very, very sad situation. So years ago, we don't talk too much on the national news about methamphetamine, but let me give you a little thing to think about, Denise. So we're all focused on fentanyl and opioids because it's killing Americans at an unprecedented level. But let me tell you how smart the Mexican cartels are when it comes to business. So early in, let's say in 1999, 2000, early 2000s, the DEA did some really successful operations in shutting down the large volumes of precursor chemicals to make methamphetamine into the U.S., pseudoephedrine specifically, right? And so the Mexican cartels took complete advantage of that, but by ordering ton quantities of pseudoephedrine and other chemicals from Asia, China, different countries, India, and imported directly into Mexico. Now they have industrial-sized labs to produce meth. So the meth is coming to America at levels that we've never seen in our lifetime. So like when I was a kid, as an agent on the street, if you seized 1 pound of methamphetamine, that would be a huge seizure. Now they're seizing, like when I was still working, we were seizing out there, 500, 600, 700, 800 pounds at a time. That's because of the methamphetamine industrial production in Mexico. So it's not just cocaine and heroin and marijuana, it's the methamphetamine as well. And by the way, if you talk to many Americans, especially in the Midwest and some other parts of the country, that's still the number one problem, methamphetamine. So it's not just the opioids and the fentanyl, but what's the common denominator? The violent, nasty, greedy Mexican cartels. They're transnational criminal organizations is what they are, and they're causing havoc in our country, and we're allowing this to happen. I don't understand it, Denise.
You know, Derek, when you're looking at numbers of 60, 70, 80,000 deaths a year, you can't get beyond that number. I mean, you just kind of go, what? I mean, we demand everybody get a flu shot so they don't die of the flu, where you might have, 10, 15,000 people that, sadly die of the flu every year. But that is small in comparison to where we are with synthetic drugs and this U48800, which is what, Chinese, right?
Look, the thing is that it's just absolutely booming, and you're 100% right, in what you're saying in regards to this issue. I mean, it's just so frustrating, the volume of drugs now and the lack of effort to go after it. And by the way, law enforcement has been doing a great job, but this is not just a law enforcement issue, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There's so many other components. There's so many other pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together. And honestly, it's just really, really scary, because, Denise, the other thing that the listeners have to understand is that you may hear at the end of this year that certain states have seen a decrease in overdose deaths. But do you know how misleading that is? I'm going to tell you why.
Yes.
Because Narcan is out there at unbelievable levels. Every single, it seems like every single place in America has Narcan with their first responders. And so they're
just going to go there. Thank you for that.
They're saving so many people from Narcan. And that's something that is underreported. It's not really consistently reported. And so, we have politicians now that want to talk about the great successes that we've had, in our fight against opioids, right? It's like so ridiculous. It's a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And it's just sad to hear these people. They have no idea what they're talking about. Just go out to any of these large departments out there and talk to the police, talk to the DEA, talk to the people on the streets. And this problem is not going away unless we start, changing certain ways of doing business.
A county just north of me, I just heard the statistic 2 days ago that last year they spent $10,000 on Narcan, which says that law enforcement is now essentially becoming first aid because they're administering so much Narcan that they can't, it's taking up so much time. And then here comes the ambulance and the paramedics and all these other people, and the guy's fine 10 minutes later. And then 4 hours later, the same guy, we're giving him Narcan again. Derek.
Derek. Yeah, no, that's what's happening. The Narcan, thank God for this Narcan drug, because it is saving a lot of lives. They are spending tremendous amounts of money on it. And it's a good purchase because it's saving lives, but that's not fixing the problem.
No, not by a long
stretch. And it certainly doesn't help when people could just walk across the border with backpacks of this stuff. And the other thing too people don't talk about is what happens when the courier brings it on a plane, and at 32,000 feet, that particular package actually gets in the ventilation system because the bag was opened up, and now we have fentanyl at 32,000 feet. I mean, yeah, it's a little dramatic. It's a little bit, extreme, but it could happen. It's not totally unrealistic.
We've been at this for decades, and you and I just summarize it by saying it is worse today than it has really ever been. I mean, states just one by one are legalizing. You've got this drug policy alliance that is funded by George Soros, and they want to legalize all narcotics. I just read their report. They want to legalize it all, but nowhere in the report did it talk about the overdoses or the deaths or, the drug rehabilitation. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. I mean, there was some recent stuff that came out about even the marijuana states, and in like Colorado, for example, just the increase in car accidents.
Mm-hmm.
And, now there was a Wall Street Journal report
talking
about the levels of the percentage of THC that's in some of this new marijuana and how it's hurting people's brains and everything else. So, yeah, it's quite scary, Denise.
Derek, you're going to have to keep coming back because I don't want to let this one go. I mean, from an education standpoint, from a volume standpoint, from a legalizing standpoint, from a first responders standpoint, I don't think we have. I mean, we keep talking about Border Patrol agents, great, wonderful, but I mean, look what the costs really are to the American taxpayer, and the laws are not on the side of DEA in order to eradicate this. Go back to the whole thing of just say no. There's a million moving parts to this, Derek.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving parts. I mean, but it all comes down to the first job of any government employee is to always maintain the public safety. And that's the bottom line. I mean, that's what really blows my mind on this whole situation at the border, putting aside the politics, right? I don't really care who's right, who's wrong. What's really disturbing, Denise, is listen to the guys on the front line, what they're saying. When I saw the Border Patrol head, the guy, Judd, what's his name, Judd?
Yeah.
He was talking the other day about like how the walls work, how they're a deterrence, how they, how they've seen dramatic decreases in certain things in areas with walls. I mean, these people in Washington, some of them probably have never been down to the border.
No.
They don't even know what goes on at the border.
Well,
they just want to hear themselves pontificate about different things and to get the votes and stuff like that. But in reality, they need to listen to the experts to see, let me tell you.
And there are lots of experts.
Put aside politics for a second and just try to comprehend this. We're in the worst drug crisis in the history of this country. And Kirstjen Nielsen, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, is trying to give a professional briefing on the border security
We don't
issues.
like your facts.
And these snot-nosed Congress people interrupt her and shut her off completely because they weren't interested. It's like, like they didn't want the hot potato in their lap because they want to pretend like they don't know, which is even worse because you should want to get educated from your professionals. And this poor woman from Department of Homeland Security who was working her butt off got cut off in the most unprofessional and rude way. It's really disgusting.
Ladies and gentlemen, big, huge round of applause for Mr. Derek Maltz. There's more coming your way, so stay with us. And Mr. Derek, thank you so much. I'm calling you back often. Well done.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.
Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget millennial entitlement and many others.
Right On, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to rightongame.com.
That's rightongame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's rightongame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
Rightongame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. Rightongame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. See ya, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. See ya, out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Sure happy I reached out to Pacific Legal Foundation. Just my favorite legal law firm. I really love these guys over there. I got the distinct pleasure of having Daniel Ortner with us, who is with Pacific Legal, and he wrote a very interesting piece in The Hill about what's going on in Utah and with the Republicans. And I was also reading some of the comments, and I'm not sure who they necessarily understood what Daniel's real message is here. But Daniel, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Sure, happy to be here, Denise.
Okay, I think what you're really saying in this article, and I really liked the way that you put it, and is that all politics are local, but you're also finding out that outside influences and activists are stepping in. So the state legislature did some interesting things. Is that about right?
Yeah, so in Utah, basically what's been the tradition for a long time in Utah is that the local parties choose their nominee through a caucus and convention system, and that system allows local activists, very engaged members, to have a great say and a great influence in the direction of the party. So they meet together. They're chosen by local nominating caucuses, basically neighborhood meetings, and then those delegates go to the state conventions, the county conventions, and meet with the potential candidates and hear speeches by the candidates, and ultimately help to nominate candidates. That process is a very dynamic one. It actually has the best example of that is that current Senator Mike Lee, who is one of the best senators in the country, the most liberty-friendly senators in the country, he was nominated largely due to the caucus system. Bob Bennett, who was the very moderate establishment candidate at the time, had a big war chest, a lot of money, would have easily won in a traditional primary race. But because Mike Lee and other candidates that were very strong conservative candidates were able to go to the convention system, they were able to unseat Senator Bennett, the incumbent, and without having to have their own enormous war chest or compromising their values by seeking large donations, they were able to appeal on the issues to the members of the party that really care about those issues, and were able to unseat an incumbent that would have otherwise been able to sail through given outside funding. And that's really what's possible in a caucus system that isn't possible in a primary system. And that, frankly, makes those that are currently incumbents very uncomfortable. And they want to change that to make the process in Utah more similar to in other states where big
As a primary
money. Well, so basically, what there was an outside group called Count My Vote that tried to force this change through a ballot initiative, through a constitutional amendment to the Utah Constitution. That effort failed for various reasons, but the Utah legislature tried to enact a SB 54 as kind of a compromise measure, and what it said was parties can still use their convention systems if they want to, but they have to allow an alternative way to get on their primary ballot through petitions, seeking petitions and signatures of members of the party, and basically allows individuals to completely bypass the ordinary system of the party that's in place to still get on the ballot. And the result that that's had has been that it has led to, and the purpose of what Utah did was that they didn't like the party nominating real conservative candidates. They wanted more moderate candidates, and that's been the actual result in place of the system has been the more conservative candidates have been unseated by moderate candidates in several instances since this has been enacted.
So it's your position, and because I think Pacific Legal is doing a friendly brief on this one.
Yeah, we filed an amicus brief. So this case, basically, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals heard this case. They unfortunately decided in favor of the state of Utah and the law that Utah has enacted. But there was a very powerful, I think very, very persuasive dissent by Judge Tinkovich of the 10th Circuit. In any event, the case is now currently being appealed up to the United States Supreme Court. The Utah Republican Party has asked the Supreme Court to take the case. So the Pacific Legal Foundation, along with the Cato Institute, filed a brief at the United States Supreme Court urging the court to take the case and to review it and to decide that the 10th Circuit's decision was wrong and that the Utah law is unconstitutional.
Okay, so the position is that the Utah law is unconstitutional because the legislature is getting involved in party politics because of their change, correct?
Right, exactly. So one of the most important, if not the most important decision that a political party makes is who is going to be its nominee. The Supreme Court has said in numerous cases that is a decision that is protected by the First Amendment's right of freedom of association, freedom of speech, etc. That decision cannot be trampled on by a state. While the state has a lot of discretion to decide a lot of things related to the way an election proceeds, how the ballot is formulated, labels on the ballot, a lot of things that the state has a lot of discretion to do. What it cannot do is dictate to a party who it must select as its nominee. That's exactly what Utah has done. The decision of what process to use is a difficult decision. There are trade-offs. There are advantages to a caucus. There are advantages to a primary. But the Utah Republican Party, as a private organization protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, is the one that should be able to make that decision, decide, balance those trade-offs, and decide what system best represents its values, best represents the membership. That is not for the state to step in and to say, well, we don't like the substantive results of your process. We think it's leading to extreme candidates, and therefore we're going to, for the sake of force this process onto you, for the sake of changing the outcome.
Daniel, so this really almost says that any possible candidate can attach himself to a whole nother party and necessarily split all kinds of votes then too, correct?
In a sense, I mean, the thing that really so the caucus and convention system currently, it ensures that the nominee that ultimately ends up representing the party is one that is aligned with the party's values, with the platform of the party. So in the convention system, candidates have to say that they agree with the platform of the party.
Correct.
If they don't do so, then they're very unlikely to get voted on by the delegates who are members of that party and ascribe to the values of the party. an outside candidate can come in, appeal to moderate, less engaged members of a party, get enough of those votes to get on the primary ballot and win due to appeal to moderates. In Utah, most people in the state are registered Republicans, but very many of them are not really conservative and not really engaged in the party, and so it's easy for someone to appeal to that mass of voters that they're not really aligned with the values of the Republican Party, and to ultimately prevail. Also, one other thing, the caucus system ensures, the way it works in practice is that it ensures that whoever ultimately wins the nomination for the party had a majority support among the delegates or the members of the party, because the convention system, you ultimately only can have, either the convention system decides who the nominee is already if they gather a certain percentage of the delegate vote, or two nominees can go on the ballot on a primary. The Utah law basically allows additional nominees to be on the primary ballot, which means that the person who ultimately is elected or chosen to be the nominee can have less than a majority of the vote. They can have only 30% or less of the vote of the party in the primary, which undermines some of the uniformity of the party as well.
This was a ballot initiative. I think that's what you said earlier, right, Daniel?
No, so there was a ballot initiative by a group called Count My Vote, but that was ultimately, I think there's some complicated technicalities of why it did not end up on the ballot, and the legislator essentially stepped in and said, well, the ballot measure was more extreme. It would have eliminated the caucus system and just required a primary. The Utah legislator basically said, well, we're going to compromise. We're going to set this. You can still have your convention system, but you have to allow this alternative avenue. So the legislator stepped in and did that, kind of trying to please both sides, but ultimately not doing undermining the caucus and the party system heavily.
What are the chances that the Supreme Court will take up this case?
The Supreme Court gets a lot of petitions and takes a very, very small fraction of the cases that it's petitioned. But despite that, I think this case has a pretty decent chance of being granted. Usually the Supreme Court wants to wait until different courts of appeal have disagreed about a legal issue where there's a circuit split. But election law is one of those areas that the court has been much more willing to step in and take cases even without a circuit split. They've been willing to say, these are important issues involving our nature of our democratic republic, and they're not weighted for a circuit split. Plus, this is interpreting whether a specific state's scheme applies to the Constitution, and so the circuit split is waiting for a split is less useful because each case is dealing with a specific scheme with very specific requirements, and so the court's been more willing to step in and to take these kinds of cases than it has cases in other areas of law. And so I think that obviously you can't guarantee that any case will be granted, but I think there's a better than usual chance for a cert petition for this one to be granted. I think also the fact that Judge Timkovich on the 10th Circuit wrote a very, very passionate and very well-reasoned and highly persuasive dissent, I think will also increase the likelihood that the cert petition is granted and the Supreme Court reviews the case.
Daniel, is this a situation where Utah, because of a caucus system, would want to be more mainstream? Because when we hear about candidates and we necessarily want to remove one, we always say, "Well, go primary them." Is this kind of where Utah's feeling pressure to kind of follow the path of other states that have a primary system?
I think the pressure is coming from the candidates, especially from incumbents, in the state. The governor, the attorney general, the lieutenant governor, these state officials feel very comfortable in their position. They were chosen through this caucus system in the first place, but now that they're incumbents and established, they're more likely to be able to get outside funding from businesses or other interest groups, and so they like the primary system because it means that someone else, if they want to run against them, has to have enough money to compete on the airwaves. Whereas if the convention system, you can lobby a smaller number of delegates. You can engage in a grassroots campaign that doesn't require the same kind of funding. And so I think they don't like that they could be challenged by, especially held accountable for whether they are really conservative candidates, actually being conservative in the way they govern. Instead, they can appeal to the most moderate members and win through the primary process, which tends to favor more moderate candidates as well.
You attended the Utah Republican Party and kind of got involved in this as a law student, right?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And so it was pretty eye-opening for you, was it not?
It really was. I mean, I never really gotten engaged in politics. I was very interested in politics. I'd done a little bit of campaigning for candidates when I was in college, but had never gotten engaged in a formal fashion. And I kind of went to one of the local neighborhood meetings on a bit of a whim. A friend of mine who was also politically engaged just encouraged me to get involved, and so I went and ran for a precinct chair position and won that position, and so I was able to attend the party meetings and then also the conventions. And what really struck me was how accessible, especially the state representative and state senators were, where I could email them and get in touch with them. I could meet up with them. They would solicit me, say, we want to talk to you about issues that matter to you, to see if you'll support us. And so it was really incredible how accessible, and also the congressional House delegation of Utah. Utah's a small state, so it's a little easier, but they were accessible. They would come to the conventions. They would meet with delegates and talk to them and debate issues with them. And I thought that was just an incredible process. As a young student, it was a real incubator for activism and for participation in the democratic process. I think if you go to the primary system, that is lost. You don't have that same incubator which develops individuals. It gets people involved in the party, gets people interested in politics. And so, one of the benefits of the caucus system is it's really good at if you're people that are a little bit interested in politics, kind of developing in them experience, developing them connections and desire and an ability to get more engaged and more involved.
Do you, Daniel, in your experience and where you are now at Pacific Legal, do you think that voters out there really across the country understand what grassroots is? Because I'm of the notion that they just don't get it completely. They hear about a candidate, they just watch it on TV, and then they think they understand when there's a whole lot more. There's probably more going on in the background that's going on in the front ground, right?
Yeah, I think we have most of what we think about with grassroots is colored by the presidential elections, where you have charismatic candidates. You have a Barack Obama, you have a Donald J. Trump, who are very charismatic candidates who have lots of followers. But a lot of politics, most really, is much more local than that. It's not just these single charismatic individuals that fill large stadiums and rallies. It's the day-to-day work of party organizing, deciding issues that matter, fundraising, actually advocating, pushing forth issues to get candidates elected. And so I think that people see the flashy candidates and the slogans, but miss a lot of what really is involved in the political process.
Indeed so. I think you need to kind of give a speech on this one, Daniel. I get really kind of disgusted with people. They go, I think I'm going to vote for so-and-so. Well, why do you know this about this person and that and that and that? And I go, no. Well, why? I mean, they'll look up one or two things and think, okay, that's cool, I'll do it. And I'm often of the notion that a vote for a candidate is not a personal vote. It's either a statewide vote if it's at the state level, or it's a vote that's good for the country, and not just because you're pro-union or you're a senior citizen or you're pro Planned Parenthood or you know what I'm saying? I mean, the vote is a much wider thing than that, and I think that's been lost in all of this. Do you agree?
I think part of the problem is that people don't feel like their vote really matters. That these representatives that were elected to Congress are not accountable to the people, and that's what I found with the Utah caucus system was that the people that we were voting for were more accountable because they had to answer to groups of active party members, and they held them to account. I think people feel like my vote doesn't matter, and so why should I get involved at all? And so that was what I saw the Utah system really helped, was allowing people, at least those that were engaged and wanted to be more engaged, to feel like what they did and what they said actually made a difference.
Well, the other thing too is that the candidates always talk in platitudes, and they tell the voters whatever. And instead of saying, okay, we have this issue, ladies and gentlemen, these are the choices, how do you think we should vote? And I've never heard a candidate ask that, ever. So I'm going to have to tap you on the shoulder here when you find out whether the Supreme Court takes this case or not.
Yeah, of course.
We're going to come into the most contentious 2020 thing here pretty soon, if it's not kind of underway already. And I think that we're going to have a lot of funny business going on, if it's not probably being planned all right now as I see it. Between now and November of 2020, things are lining up. So you're going to have to keep us current. I'll have to tap you on the shoulder and find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
What the outcome is on this one. I appreciate your effort in this. I was kind of chagrined at the comments that you got on your piece in the Hill that just tells you that people didn't understand the spirit of what you wrote. In fact, they spent more time attacking the Mormon Church than they did about the spirit of the article.
I think people don't understand principled constitutional arguments very well. You make arguments. It's not an argument that this party is better or the system is better. It's an argument that ultimately freedom is what the Constitution requires. It requires a system where individuals, parties, people freely associate together and make decisions that ultimately contribute to the well-being of the nation. And that's what to me, this case is about. Is it's ultimately about the question of who gets to decide. Does the state get to decide, or do individuals get to decide? And this case, I think, shows that when the state decides, ultimately, especially in political issues, who it's helping are those that are in power, those that are incumbent. People that use the power of the state to keep themselves in power and perpetuate the position that they're in.
Precisely.
Freedom is dynamic and allows for change. It allows for innovation, and it ultimately allows the marketplace of ideas to grow and to have full expression.
Well said. Thank you, Mr. Daniel Ortner. Ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short-barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, Pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Oh, goodness, immigration. I mean, it has caused, and wall, no, the fence, no, the barrier, no, the steel, no, the concrete. We don't, Pelosi, Schumer, chaos. But Mr. Matt O'Brien is with us, and he's the director of research over at FAIR, my favorite go-to place, which is the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And Mr. Matt's been at this immigration thing, gosh, decades, haven't you, Mr. Matt?
Yes, just about 2 decades.
2. You haven't fixed it yet?
I'm trying.
Well, I had a former DEA agent with us. He was in charge of special operations and at 28 years. And I asked him the same thing. You mean you haven't solved this drug problem yet in 28 years? Okay. Let me start off with this, since you've been at it so long and in various functions, I might add, inside government and outside government. Correct, Matt?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I am reminded that during the Obama administration, there were laws, and then the agencies themselves within those laws did all these regulation things. And those regulations were just put in there kind of at will. And during the early part of the Trump administration, I think it was 3 for 1. You can put in one regulation, but you got to take out 3. Is that right?
That sounds correct.
Okay. So, under immigration procedures and process, I'm arguing that they're antiquated, or some of those processes and procedures are antiquated. And I don't want to get caught in that snare of comprehensive immigration reform, because I think that down at the regulation level, there are other things that we can do under the regulation side to clean some things up. Is that, am I misguided in that notion, Matt?
Well, I don't think you're misguided, but I think the biggest problem that we have with immigration is that prior to the Trump administration, you have had successive Democratic and Republican administrations just decide to selectively ignore various portions of the immigration laws because they wanted to pander to perceived political constituencies. Now, that's a big problem in the United States because Congress's function is to make the law and the executive's function is to enforce it. So the executive shouldn't be usurping Congress's function and just willy-nilly picking the portions of the law that it likes and doesn't like. And similarly, the courts shouldn't be usurping Congress's function by making all of these activist rulings. And then Congress should actually be changing the laws if Congress thinks that there's a problem, rather than leaving it to the agencies to do via regulations. So there is some wiggle room for the executive to respond to changing circumstances, which I think the Trump administration has done quite admirably, but at every attempt it's been blocked, mainly by the Ninth Circuit, but some other liberal courts in Virginia and Massachusetts. So overall, I think what we have a problem with is that Republican federalism is not functioning the way that it should be anymore President Trump, on the other hand, has been trying to make it function the way that it should and has been met at every turn with resistance both from Congress and the courts.
Okay. I didn't like that answer, but I respect the answer. And I knew the answer. I just wanted you to tell me something different. So under the Obama administration, with the use of the pen and the phone, we ended up with DACA and DAPA, correct?
Correct.
And the Trump administration came in and under authority, constitutional authority, he can amend those previous executive orders. He can delete them. Or he can, he has a lot of authority to manage standing executive orders from any previous sitting president, correct?
That's 100% correct. And so the executive orders and the regulations can be changed. What I think happened was the changes that the Trump administration made, which were fantastic and very much needed, were treated by the opposition as though they were some kind of gospel that had been handed down from St. Obama and therefore it never ever could be changed. But the fact is that differing administrations and agencies within differing administrations do make regulatory changes. That's why we have the type of administrative law system that we do. And that allows the government flexibility in applying the law because Congress isn't always specific down to the nth detail in the laws. It leaves some of these things up to the executive agencies. So in that sense, we really have been failing under Republican administrations to use the regulations appropriately in order to try and enforce the immigration laws.
Okay, that's the answer I liked. Okay, that you got some of the answer I liked. Good boy. But I guess here's the interesting thing. The reason that the sitting president has this authority, and really the agencies do too with the regulations, is because from year to year, month to month, even day to day, conditions change that actually require a relook or additional management, annexation, or amendment, correct?
That's 100% correct, and Congress even acknowledged that with Section 1182F, which essentially acts as an override provision that allows the president to respond to conditions along the border when they change and when they pose some kind of a threat, not just to national security, but to American interests, is the language used in the statute. Now, there's also a doctrine that backs that up called the plenary power doctrine, which says that there are certain things that are exercises of the president's power as the chief executive that shouldn't be interfered with by the courts because they are things that involve political knowledge and knowledge of the president's negotiating strategy, which the courts are never going to be privy to. And so between the plenary power doctrine and the powers that Congress specifically designated to the president under Section 1182F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, none of these decisions that have been issued by the courts should have been issued. The president has been acting well within his authority to respond to things like the border caravans.
You haven't been invited over to CNN to kind of debate Don Lemon or Jim Acosta, have you?
No, for some reason they don't invite me over there.
Oh boy, with what you just said, you could neutralize everybody over there, including maybe even the Washington Post, Mr. Matt.
Well, I don't know if they would agree with me that that's how the law should be applied, but throughout the history of the plenary power doctrine and going back to the 1800s, various permutations of what now is 1182F, the Supreme Court has been remarkably consistent in backing the president up on this. It's just that this progressive notion that you chuck precedent when you don't like what the outcome is has really been affecting the way these cases are handled in places like the Ninth Circuit, the First Circuit, and that's problematic.
Now, let me ask you this question. I think there is, so there's my inference here already, but there is a difference between national security and public safety, is there not?
There is. So national security is something that constitutes a threat to the security of the nation. Public safety implicates things like crimes, gang activity, drug trafficking, human smuggling, along with public health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So they're overlapping. There are things that can be both a public safety and a national security concern, and there are times when criminal activity or a public health issue will become a national security issue. But public safety is usually a little more focused on a domestic threat or a threat that comes into the United States from outside and has domestic import, whereas national security looks at both internal threats and threats from abroad.
I bring that up because in this immigration debate, we just hear a threat to national security, but I'm not hearing really any. I'm hearing it kind of conflated, and I'm not hearing the term public safety. And when you have got members now deceased, deceased angel families that are victims of immigration crime or, migrant crime, that's a public safety thing. The fentanyl and the heroin, that's a public safety thing as a result of the threat to national security and violations to national security. Did I get that right?
You did. And in fact, I think one of the reasons that you don't hear that discussed in the media quite as much is because the media is flocking this narrative that illegal aliens commit crime at a lower rate than native-born U.S. citizens and even people who are lawfully present immigrants in the United States. And the basis for that argument is that these people are so scared of being deported that they don't want to commit any crimes because then they'll have to go home and their primary interest is in being here. That's not accurate, though. The fact is, if you look at what went on with some of the protests surrounding DACA, you had these huge movements of people who said, basically, we're undocumented and we're not going anywhere. And undocumented, unafraid, I think was their formal slogan. When you have people willing to do that, that just says that these people are not afraid of revealing themselves, and they're not afraid that as soon as they become apparent, ICE is going to collect them and send them home. So that's a policy problem because we haven't been consistent with our immigration efforts. But you also have to take into account that most of these studies that claim that illegal aliens commit crimes at a lower rate tend to do things like the Cato Institute just takes out all drug offenses because in their libertarian minds, drug offenses aren't really crimes. You have other organizations that just ignore the fact that entering the United States illegally is a crime. And then most people who enter the U.S. illegally continue to conceal their unlawful presence by committing other crimes like identity fraud, tax fraud, benefit theft, all kinds of other things, theft of government services. And nobody wants to talk about those. And so what they're saying is that they think that illegal aliens commit violent crimes or serious felonies at a lower rate than people who are born in the United States or are lawfully present. But that doesn't appear to be the case when you start looking at some of the data that's available.
The undocumenteds don't seem to be afraid because, they've actually shown up in a State of the Union address as guests of politicians, right?
Yes, in the Texas legislature to protest. And then the Texas legislator who said, I really should call ICE and report these people was then lambasted in the mainstream media for somehow being awful when, the fact is, if a person who is a U.S. citizen started causing a problem, nobody would say, well, this person has a First Amendment right to be here and disrupt the proceedings of this body. The person would be removed for trespassing. So I'm not sure why it was somehow an offense against the gods of political correctness to suggest that people who have no authorization to be in the United States ought to be removed by ICE, the agency that's responsible for removing them. But such is the world today.
Yeah, we're picking and choosing law here in compliance, for sure. Let's move over to this other little brouhaha that was happening, I guess, a few days ago, and that was the debate over how many militant / terrorists, possible terrorists, had come across the border as opposed to the real number. But I would argue that there are many moving parts when it comes to who gets labeled on the terrorist watch list, that are on the terrorist list, or on the no-fly list, or that have connections to other militant organizations. It isn't just a black and white condition, is it, Matt?
Well, it's not, and there are a number of different lists. So there's the no-fly list, which includes anyone who's a threat to civil aviation, and that could be someone who has been declared by a court to be mentally ill and has a history of federal aviation charges for disrupting flights. That could include terrorists. It could include foreign intelligence operatives. It could include people who are prohibited because of their nationality from looking at certain types of protected technology. So that's a pretty broad list. There's the terrorist watch list, which includes nominations from the intelligence community of people who are have been found to have ties to terrorist organizations, but may not have actually engaged in any terrorist activity. Mm-hmm. And there's all different permutations of these lists. And what happens is when people are claiming that there's extremely low numbers, they tend to be looking at people who are known illegal aliens on the southern border, who are on both the terrorist watch list and the special interest countries list, which is yet another list. And those are the only people that they count. But the fact is, if you start looking at the numbers of people, which the government doesn't release, but I've seen various permutations of this data when I was working for the government, there's all kinds of encounters of people who are potential terrorists every day at both of the borders and all of the airports, just because of the state of the security of the world at the current time. I mean, we were saying when we first started talking today that there's chaos everywhere, and the fact is that means there are going to be a lot of people who are suspect. Now, some of those people rise to a level where we're not going to let them into the United States, and some of them rise to a level where we just want to know they're here. Others will rise to a level where we may want to let them in, but law enforcement, the intelligence community may want to keep an eye on their travels and what they're up to. But these numbers, it's just fantasist nonsense by people who want to portray, everyone who is from outside the United States as being benevolent and everyone who is inside the United States is somehow less worthy. It's ridiculousness. I mean, the fact is, it's not illegal to travel here from Iran, and 99% of the people that come here from Iran have to be suspect because they're coming from a country whose government is overtly hostile to the United States. And if we don't think that those people are subject to coercion by that government, then we're just living in a dream world.
I'm gonna probably get this wrong the way I say it. So when I do, please correct me. But those that fly into the United States from any foreign country, especially the handful that are particularly rogue and hostile to the United States, it is actually those manifests, those visas, all those things are highly scrutinized, and it is actually the burden of the carrier, the airline itself, to make sure they don't get on that plane, correct?
Correct. There's a multi-layer system. And so the first thing that happens is the person goes to the local embassy or consulate, U.S. embassy or consulate, and applies for a visa. So the first burden falls on the State Department to give that person a pre-clearance. And all a visa is, it's portrayed in the media with the so-called travel ban and all these other things as a guarantee that you're going to be admitted to the United States, but it's not. Legally speaking, a visa is and always has been a permit to board a common carrier and travel to the border. So that's the first level of scrutiny. Then while you're flying here, the passenger manifests are scrutinized by Customs and Border Protection. When you actually reach the border, Customs and Border Protection can refuse admission to you. Now, in between those two, the scrutiny by the Department of State and the scrutiny by Customs and Border Protection, as you're boarding the plane, the passenger manifest is transmitted to CBP, and CBP, before you even arrive at the United States, can tell the air carrier,
yes,
listen, we don't think you've met your burden to check this person's information. You're going to bear the return cost for taking this person back home. Similarly, if the person arrives at the U.S. and the air carrier has represented the person had a passport, had a valid visa, but it turns out they don't, CBP can also make the air carrier bear the burden of taking the person back and bear the cost of that. And there's usually a fine associated with that as well.
I bring this up because this is a component, Mr. Matt, that has to do with really a part of questionable people coming into the United States that really never gets talked about, because there are firewalls, if you will, that keep them from actually entering into the United States, even if they get on that plane. And even if they get on that plane and we allow them to get on that plane, and Customs and Border Patrol gets kind of a wink and a nod, like, go ahead and let them come in because we're going to tail them. There are a lot of moving parts in that too, especially when it comes to necessarily visa overstays, correct?
That is correct. And so the problem is there's only so many law enforcement officers and so many computer systems that are looking at all of this stuff. So frequently you have people that whatever terrorist organization has sent them to the United States has groomed them to be what in the industry is called a clean skin. And they don't have a record. They don't trip anything. And so those people are a major concern. But you also have people who the connections are kind of iffy, and us being a free country and wanting to encourage people to come here for business and to not be penalizing people for political views that, are a little outside the mainstream but aren't radical. We have a tendency to let people into the United States and default to that rather than excluding them. I think that has been a problem. I think after September 11th that standard should have changed. The law is very clear that Customs and Border Protection can exclude anyone who's not a U.S. citizen from the United States simply because we believe it's not in the interest of the U.S. to let them in. The authority to behave in that fashion, was resident in the individual immigration inspectors, I would say probably up until about the 1970s. And then that changed in the 80s and 90s, and we got very lax. Unfortunately, we haven't returned that authority to those individuals.
Yes.
The consular officers at the State Department, on the other hand, it's very clear that their decisions are not subject to review by the courts in the United States. And the legal standard for a consular officer denying your visa application, which they refer to as a refusal, is that the reviewing consular officer in his or her discretion believes that it's not appropriate to issue. And once the person has said that, for whatever reason, then that is a legally binding decision. And while the State Department does have an informal review process internally for some of those decisions, they very rarely reverse them.
Fascinating. We've got a couple of minutes left here. Matt, I think the last time I counted when I was at the fair event, Hold Their Feet to the Fire last fall, I think I counted 84 different types of visas. Is that about the right number?
Yes, there is a whole alphabet soup. There's non-immigrant visas. There's transit visas. There are visas for people who are political asylees and refugees.
Cultural, education.
They fall into every category. It's a little bit complicated for CBP and the Department of State when they're administering this, but what this does is it gives us a pretty good indication of what people are coming here for, how long we should let them in, and what we're expecting them to do here in the U.S. And so while to outsiders it appears to be an alphabet soup, it's a pretty effective classification system in terms of administering immigration. The problem is that we've gotten very lax with giving people a shorter amount of stay, with finding people when they've overstayed. And this goes back to FAIR's position, and you brought this up earlier. We don't need comprehensive immigration reform. We need comprehensive immigration enforcement. We just simply need to enforce the laws that are on the books effectively. And we got much better at doing that after September 11th. But then under 8 years of the Obama administration, many of the advances, and frankly, I think the Bush administration didn't go far enough, but many of the advances that we did make were reversed because the Obama administration was so hostile to immigration enforcement. I think the Trump administration perceived a lot of the flaws and took steps to correct them, but they've been challenged at every single turn by the courts, and they have not been supported even by some of the Republicans in Congress. And that's unfortunate because it's the American people who continue to suffer.
Goodness gracious. I had these questions for you, and your answers were more comprehensive than I ever dreamed of, and I appreciate the context. You were the one person I think of the list that we were given when we did the interviews at the Hold Their Feet to the Fire event that I didn't get to talk to, and now I'm mad. So when I come next time, you need to just book about 2 hours with me because my show is 2 hours. But I'm just going to hand you the microphone. And
well, I
then
can certainly come do a whole show with you. I'd be happy to do it, and call anytime. I'm always happy to come on with you. We have great conversations, and I always appreciate talking with you.
thank you. You're very kind to say that, and I'm happy that we were able to cover some things that have something other than the wall and the barriers and the steel and all that, because there are so many moving parts to this whole thing. It's so comprehensive. It's so big. And the one thing I just want to ask all the Democrats is, what is the acceptable number of unchecked people here in the United States? And I have yet to have anybody ask that question. So when you were in the halls of Congress, would you ask somebody that question for me?
Well, we've been asking them that for a long time, and it never gets an answer. And I think it's because they understand that if they admitted that there was any number, then they admit that they're assuming a certain level of risk. Now, realistically speaking, we're never going to be able to keep everyone 100% safe in all circumstances. But the fact is, I think the government owes the American public nothing less than its best, most comprehensive effort.
Matt O'Brien, Federation for American Immigration Reform. Thank you so much, Mr. Matt. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. We'll see you again next time.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.